Small voice. Have you been in Elijah's cave? It's that still small voice comes from that old story of Elijah in the cave, hearing a voice that didn't come through the earthquake or the fire or the winds. I'm guessing that whether you've called it Elijah's cave or not, you've spent time there. I'm going to tell you a story that I gave you the headline of last Sunday, a time in my life when I was in that cave, that Elijah's cave of the heart. I was 25. I was actually right in the middle of serving my internship here, and many of you knew me then. And I was recovering from a mental health crisis when a church auntie, her name is Karen, took me in. So I stayed in her little spare bedroom, my childhood friend Kelly's room, for a few months. Kelly had previously stayed with my family after she had come back from a hard time studying abroad, and so there was a beautiful interconnected roots to it all. But the thing that surprised Karen, and honestly it surprised me too, is that I stayed in her little spare room for months and hardly spoke a word to her. I was in such a place inside where I needed to shut off and hide from the world. I got up and I came and did my work, and that was about all I could muster in terms of interacting with people. And so when I got home, I just would hole up in that little room. And when I left, I didn't quite realize what an impact that would have on Karen and what she would be thinking about this strange young man in her house. And she said, I remember, well, this wasn't what I was expecting it would be like. Which was such a generous and gentle way to name what is the essential vulnerability of needing help and offering it. To need one another, as we've been talking about, to depend upon each other is vulnerable. And not only for the person in need of help, but to welcome the stranger in, or even the not-so-stranger, is an act of vulnerability, is an act of welcoming in the unknown and potentially being affected by it. So this was the beginning of my learning about my introversion. You might not believe this, but I actually have a fair amount of introversion in me. I need a lot more time alone than I usually give myself permission to have. Because I really want to belong, and I love people, and I love being with people. But I first realized it in this time in my life. I was holing up in Karen's, and the next year I was serving as a chaplain, and every day I would get home and I just didn't want to talk to anybody. All of that energy I had for being with people had been spent, and I needed to dwell in a quieter cave. I was discovering what David White calls my adult aloneness. I want to share his poem about this with you. It's called The House of Belonging. I awoke this morning in the golden light, turning this way and that, thinking for a moment it was one day like any other. But the veil had gone from my darkened heart, and I thought, it must have been the quiet candlelight that filled my room. It must have been the first easy rhythm with which I breathed myself to sleep. It must have been the prayer I said, speaking to the otherness of the night. And I thought, this is the good day you could meet your love. This is the black day someone close to you could die. This is the day you realize how easily the thread is broken between this world and the next. And I found myself sitting up in the quiet pathway of light, the tawny, close-grained cedar burning round me like fire, and all the angels of this housely heaven ascending through the first roof of light the sun has made. This is the bright home in which I live. This is where I ask my friends to come. This is where I want to love all the things it has taken me so long to learn to love. This is the temple of my adult aloneness. And I belong to that aloneness as I belong to my life. There is no house like the house of belonging. So here's the counterpoint to what we were talking about last week, about all those roots intermingling and caring for each other. Community, it is essential on the journey, but there are far reaches of the territory of the soul where no one can accompany us. Heights where the community of interconnected roots gives way to a more delicate, fragile ecosystem above the tree line. And we need to bring our backpacks with us there. And we need them to be full of the blessing of community. Because we're not going to survive the journey without, but the community itself can't accompany us there. I remember learning about that alpine ecosystem growing up, going to Yosemite. One of my moms, Laurel, she had worked in Yosemite throughout her 20s, and often summer would bring a trip to Tuolumne Meadows up in the high country. And I was cautioned as a curious kid who didn't particularly like the hiking, but was interested in exploring, about the damage that I could do to the alpine ecosystem, how delicate and fragile life is there above the tree line. How the plants that grow there, the low shrubs and mosses, the alpine grasses, they grow very, very slowly because water and nutrients are scarce, especially nutrients. Warmth is scarce. They often form dense mats or cushion-like formations to conserve the moisture, protect against the wind. And even one footfall can create long-lasting damage. As climate change warms temperatures, these high alpine ecosystems are actually receding. The trees are moving up higher and higher as less territory is available to them. More of these ecosystems are in danger. And as an aside, I hope that you have on your calendars this last weekend of the month, we're going to have a climate revival. We're joining Unitarian Universalists all across the country in thinking about how does climate justice connect all of our values and justice work, and how it is the lens through which we need to understand what it means to be a people of faith in this time. So we'll be talking about it that Sunday. There's a workshop on Saturday. I hope you can be there. This territory, though, this fragile, delicate, endangered territory above the tree line, the line itself, and it's usually not quite as discreet as that, it's a reminder that there is a boundary, there is a need for separation. It's that decision to end the conversation or the relationship, to decline the call, to not hit send on that hastily, furiously tapped out email. The way in which healthy connection sometimes looks like distance, the way that boundaries serve to protect the fragility and vulnerability of life. I read a book once, Susan Cain's book, The Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. And she talks about, and this has become kind of a in vogue term in some circles, HSPs. Do we have any HSPs here? Self-identified HS? You know what I'm talking about. Highly sensitive people. I think we might have a higher quotient in church life than the general population. And this quality of naming, of recognizing our sensitivity is not easy in our culture. To celebrate highly sensitive people and the need for them, the creativity and the care that they can bring to a community, it's something we all benefit from but have a hard time recognizing, I think. I remember thinking about this in a story that Richard Powers, who wrote the Over story, the book after that he wrote was Bewilderment, and it was this story of a son and a father and a son, who were grieving because mom had died. And son is neurodivergent, Robin's his name, and he's different in so many ways. And when a pediatrician tells his father that he might be on the spectrum, his father just delivers this line that stuck with me. I wanted to tell the man that everyone alive on this fluke little planet is on the spectrum. That's what a spectrum is. We're all finding ourselves on these many, many spectrums, right? Our culture, Anais Nin says, has made a virtue of living only as extroverts. And by doing so, we've discouraged the inner journey, the quest for a center. So we lost our center, she says, and we have to find it again. And Susan Cain says in that book, we've gone from being a culture, having an American culture that is a culture of character, to a culture of personality. And I think we see that on the news regularly now. A culture of character teaches us that we are each responsible for tending to our own tree line wherever we fall on whatever spectrum. That to be an adult is to tend to one's own inner experience, to take responsibility for one's choices and feelings. A culture of personality lets us off the hook and says, as long as you can get people to agree with you, it doesn't matter who you blame for your problems or how you demand consolation from others. We're going to talk more about this next week, but those Hebrew prophets, like Elijah, but all of them really, their role was to point out the way that the people had strayed, had lost their way, had lost the roots of their culture, and to call them back into covenant, back into right relationship with each other and the earth and God. And when politicians are fear-mongering about immigrants eating pets, it's a clear sign that the people have strayed. But it's also true, and this is what I've been struggling to think about, is we have within us, all of us, a reasonable fear of the stranger. Those who don't look like us, don't behave like us, come from different cultures, do things differently than us. That wariness is a reasonable response to the vulnerability, the danger that we are in when we invite someone to cross into our delicate ecosystems. We do need to protect our boundaries. And when I try to understand And then he goes to Washington, D.C. and lays them all out in front of the Capitol building.